This is the Parliament Channel and Parliament Radio 105.5 FM.
The Honourable the President.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we willingly acknowledge you as the Supreme Being, most gracious and most merciful. Look down, we beseech you, on us who are members of this Senate, and deign to assist us in the duties that we have to perform on behalf of our beloved country of Trinidad and Tobago. Open our eyes to see the truth, and help us to accept it with all its implications into our lives. Direct us, O Lord, in our deliberations, so that setting aside private interests, unwholesome prejudices, and personal affections, we may treat all matters set before us with honesty, courage, and conviction. Through all we say and do in this Senate, may we give glory and honor to your holy name, inspire confidence in our fellow citizens, and make a positive contribution to the peace and prosperity of our nation. Amen.
Public Business, Government Business, Bill second reading.
Honourable members, the debate on the second reading of the following bill, which was in progress when the Senate adjourned on Tuesday, October the 24th, 2017, will be resumed. A bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Service of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ending on the 30th day of September 2018. Honourable members, those who have spoken are as follows: Senator the Honourable Alison West, Minister in the Ministry of Finance and mover of the motion; Senator Wade Mark; Senator Torel Tricky-Soon; Senator the Honourable Clarence Rambarat, Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries; Senator Dr. Daneshwar Mahabir; Senator the Honourable Franklin Khan, Minister of Energy and Energy Industries; Senator Anita Haynes; Senator Stephen Creese; Senator Nigel De Freitas; Senator Paul Richards; Senator Daniel Dukey; and Senator Dr. Lester Henry. All members wishing to join the debate may now do so. Senator Hussain.
Madam President, as I rise in this August chamber to contribute to this debate on the Appropriation Bill 2017, I wish to thank you for giving me this opportunity. Before I begin, I would like to express my deepest appreciation to the Honourable Kamala Prasad Bisesa, Senior Counsel, Leader of the Opposition, for having the confidence in me to serve as a Senator in this 11th Republican Parliament. Madam President, I listened attentively to the Opposition Leader's response to this bill, and it was informative, it was comprehensive, and it displayed the innovation and creativity that is required to steer Trinidad and Tobago on the course of good governance again. I would like to congratulate Senator Mark and Senator Haynes for their brilliant contributions yesterday. And as I sat here and I listened to the Minister in the Ministry of Finance for her presentation, I described this budget as a taxing budget. Are they taxing their way out of a recession? Taxation will plunge us further into the depths of inflation, depression, and frustration. The minister is trying to defy the principles of economics. She is trying to grow the economy by taking away from the people. Madam President, we often forget that a government is of the people, for the people, and by the people. The ministers are the custodians of the assets therein. As such, the government must be accountable, transparent, participative, and responsible. On the 16th of December 2014, there was a historic passage of the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act. It is an act that seeks to provide for public procurement and the disposal of public property in accordance with the principles of good governance, namely accountability, integrity, transparency, and value for money, and the establishment of the Office of the Procurement Regulation. Disheartening, the People's Partnership government lost the reins of power to the Rowley PNM on September 7, 2015. They campaigned on a mantra of red and ready. The nation had expectation that they were ready for governance. But after 2 years, it seems that that mantra has changed from red and ready to red and unsteady. Madam President, this government continues to disappoint the population with their broken promises. We were promised the appointment of a procurement regulator since the first budget in 2015. The Minister of Finance said that the government would operationalize the new procurement agency in the shortest possible time. In 2016, we were promised that the public procurement system would be fully operationalized in 2017, and the regulator will be appointed by March 2017. March 2017 has long gone, and no procurement regulator has been appointed. In 2017, during the minister's mid-year review, he indicated that no regulator has been appointed, but the Ministry of Finance is in the process of shortlisting candidates. Madam President, I must note that it was improper for the Ministry of Finance to interfere or participate in any process regarding the appointment of a regulator, as it is an independent office. This concern caused the Leader of the Opposition to write to His Excellency on this matter, and subsequently we saw that the position of procurement regulator has been advertised by the Office of the President. And then we hear in the Minister's third budget presentation a few weeks ago, he reported that no procurement regulator has been appointed. The disappointment of another broken promise by this PNM government. Madam President, how much longer are we going to come to this Parliament with excuses for the halt on the implementation of this legislation? I call upon the government to implement and operationalize the Public Procurement Act now. This act was designed for us to get value for money, and it would curtail the wanton wastage and corruption with the awards of contracts. Madam President, millions of dollars are lost to corruption and overpricing of contracts. Those millions of dollars that are lost can go towards sectors in our society that desperately needs the money, so that the education, agricultural, and national security sectors would not have to be cut by millions of dollars, so that you would not have to cut gate, so that you would not have to tax almost everything in this country, so that you can settle wage negotiations with public servants and other public sector employees, so that we can raise senior citizens' pensions, so that doctors can get jobs and not remain idle, so that drugs and medication can be made available for patients at our hospitals. The millions of dollars that is leaked and pilfered through corruption could have been channeled to those in society that needs it. But in this country, it seems that this government is intent on making the rich richer and the poor poorer. Madam President, the question to be asked is whether the implementation of the Public Procurement Act is being deliberately delayed by this government. And I say this because I move to a saga in the series of corruption, famously coined as the scandal known as Sandals. The manner in which this deal is unfolding in itself sends a clarion call for the implementation of the procurement legislation. I must remind the Senate that this is a billion-dollar project being undertaken without any procurement. The government has no interest in inviting other brands to tender. Basically, what is happening is that the government said that they want sandals, so they are going to get sandals. It seems as though this sandals deal was in the pipeline while the Honorable Prime Minister was the opposition leader, as he admitted that he began discussions with Butch Stewart, chairman of Sandals, since then. One wonders what special interest does the PNM have with Sandals? The government seems to be expediting this project, as they have already acquired the lands from CL Financial for the Sandals Resort at the Boko Golden Grove Estate to the tune of $174 million in March 2017. Madam President, a special purpose company, Golden Grove Boko Limited, headed by Mr. Neil Wilson, was formed to negotiate with Sandals. When Mr. Wilson was asked about the acquisition of the land for Sandals, his response was, and I quote from the Newsday, 31st of July 2017, "I still need to speak with the Prime Minister. He would know more than I would, because he would have an idea as to what the plans are in respect of the lands. I need to speak with him to find out where we are, because I don't have a good grasp at this point." Madam President, this is 5 months after Mr. Wilson has been appointed a director of the company. He does not know about the land deal. It is clear that the Prime Minister is the only one who seems to know what is happening. There is no transparency in this deal. Madam President, it seems that this special purpose company is now obsolete, as the Prime Minister has usurped its function. He is acting as the negotiator, the procurer, the real estate agent, and the investor in the Sandals deal. But it begs the question, why does the Prime Minister have so much interest in this project? The deal reeks of dark corners and inconsistencies. It is a scandalous deal. Madam President, the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, the Honorable Gaston Brown, is reported to have said on the 28th of July 2017, and I quote from the Antigua Observer, "About a month ago, I got a call from Mr. Gordon Butch Stewart, the chairman of Sandals. He said to me, 'Prime Minister, I want us to meet. I want us to have lunch.' Prior to that, he was buttering me up. Christmas, I got a bottle of Dom Perignon. On my birthday, I got another bottle of Dom Perignon." Madam Speaker, I had to Google what this is, and I found that it is one of the most expensive champagnes in the world at a price of over £1,000. Prime Minister Brown went on to say that Butch sent a private jet for him to fly to Grenada and then to Barbados to negotiate the expansion of their Sandals resort in Antigua. It leaves one to wonder if any member of this government is receiving similar treatment. I am not casting any aspersions on anyone. I am merely asking, given in the national interest, are they receiving gifts or trips to negotiate certain deals? Madam President,
Senator Hosein, just have a seat. I'm very reluctant to interrupt you because it is your maiden contribution. But the standing orders still subsist during any contribution. So I would ask you to not impute improper motives to members of the government. Okay? Thank you.
I'm merely asking questions. Madam President, what? Yes.
Saying, please, I'm going to give you as much leeway. It is your maiden contribution. But as I say, the standing orders have precedence over everything else in this chamber. Okay?
Madam President.
Thank you.
Madam President, what is interesting is that every time this government reports on Sandals, their version of the story changes. We are now hearing that the model for Sandals is one similar to that was offered to Hyatt and Hilton. Now we hear that taxpayers have to bear the burden of constructing a billion-dollar hotel in these harsh economic times. An interesting chart was compiled by Mr. Afro Raymond, which demonstrated the cost of the Trinidad Hilton, the Tobago Hilton, and the Hyatt Regency in Port of Spain. Trinidad Hilton, size 418 rooms, cost $634 million, cost per room $1.52 million. Trinidad Hilton, size 198 rooms, cost $388 million, cost per room $1.96 million. Hyatt Regency Port of Spain, 428 rooms, cost $516 million, cost per room $1.21 million. Madam President, the proposal for Sandals is 750 rooms, the largest hotel in Trinidad and Tobago. Using Hilton and Hyatt as a cost comparator, it can easily be predicted that the construction of Sandals is a billion-dollar project. Can we bear this burden of constructing this hotel right now? Is this why the minister continues to cut, and tax, so that the monies can be allocated to this project? Sandals has managed to extract concessions from various Caribbean governments. In Barbados, Sandals is a beneficiary tax concession for 25 years. They waived all taxes, duties, and other imports on all capital goods, whether imported or locally sourced, all consumables for hotel operations, all food, alcohol, and beverages, all VAT on services related to the construction of the hotel, income taxes, corporate taxes, duties, exemptions on vehicles. In Grenada, Sandals is the beneficiary of waiver of payment of corporate taxes for 25 years, property tax 25 years, waive all import duties for 25 years, and waive VAT for 15 years on consumer goods. In Antigua and Barbuda, according to Prime Minister Brown, Sandals shut its doors for 5 months, affecting over 700 employees. He described it as an act of hostility designed to extract more concessions from the government of Antigua and Barbuda. Madam President, are we going to give Sandals the same tax concessions? Is Sandals coming to our country to operate tax-free for 20, 25, or even 30 years? Then I learned through the budget debate in that other place that an MOU between Trinidad and Tobago and Sandals were taking place, discussions were taking place. And if you would permit me, Madam Speaker, to quote from the Hansard, the Prime Minister is reported to have said that they, meaning Sandals, came last Wednesday, which would have been the 4th of October 2017. And he said, we had some discussions involving the Minister of Tourism, Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister, the Minister of Planning and Development, and we agreed on a memorandum of understanding, which is now being signed. Madam President, when I heard that, I was unsure whether the MOU was signed. There has not been a single press release or statement on the signing of this MOU. It really begs the question whether this MOU was signed. I hope that the Minister of Finance can bring some clarity to this issue when she winds up the debate. Madam President, transparency and accountability demand, once signed by the government and Sandals, that this MOU must be made public. We in the UNC demand that it be laid in this honorable House forthwith. Madam President, it is noteworthy to mention the controversy involving Sandals and Turks and Caicos. In 2009, the Premier, Michael Misek, resigned following allegations of corruption for which he's on trial. In the opening address of that trial, which was published, Andrew Mitchell, Queen's Counsel, outlined a land transaction that allegedly defrauded the Turks and Caicos government of millions of dollars. On that same piece of land now stands a subsidiary of Sandals Beaches. That between August 2005 and December 2010, millions was paid to a company in which the Premier Misek which he held 20% shareholding. Further, these allegations of political contributions to assist with the re-election campaign of the PNP government. Further, by agreement, Beaches Resort got a tax concession for a 20-year period. Sandals subsequently responded and indicated that the payments were made but were unauthorized and were made by a senior executive member of Sandals. They then paid $12 million to the government of TCI as a part of the corruption probe. Madam President, we must notice that this trend has developed in other Caribbean states. We must notice the trends of the protracted tax concession periods. We must not allow sandals to hold us as hostages, as they do with other countries. Madam Speaker, I therefore call upon this government, Madam President, sorry, I therefore call upon this government to come clean on the deal that is being offered to sandals. They must tell the nation the concessions and incentives that are being given to sandals. The government would allow a mega hotelier to escape the wrath of taxes but continue to tax every cent that the poor man has. This budget will bankrupt the poor. Madam President, there is much more to say, but time does not permit me. And then I move on to the corruption that is being unveiled day by day at the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. It is unprecedented. It is an embarrassment to the nation. The Prime Minister described it as a den of conflict, corruption, and inequity. And we must remember that what is taking place currently at the port falls directly on the Prime Minister, as he has accepted full responsibility for the fiasco. Madam President, because of the failure of the Port Authority and the Ministry of Works and Transport, they could not even extend the contract of the Superfast Galicia until a new vessel is sourced. This caused the Superfast Galicia to leave our shores superfast. Madam President, there was a total failure and seemingly a breakdown of communication between the government minister and port board, because they could not even properly extend the contract of the Galicia until a new vessel was sourced. Yes.
What you are talking about, some of it is in the public domain, but I just want to caution you that there is a joint select committee that has been mandated to look into all of this. So I'm listening carefully to what you're saying, and I'm just cautioning you at this stage, okay?
I understand, Madam President. Madam President, when I listened to the GSC on the ferry issue, what I understand from that was that the Tobago stakeholders and the port board, they themselves wanted and recommended that there be an 18-month contract to be provided for the Galicia. But what we further understood is that the then Minister of Works and Transport at that time did not bring the note to cabinet, so that this caused some issues with the owners of the Galicia, which caused them to leave Trinidad and Tobago. Madam President, when the Galicia left our shores on the 21st of April 2017, we were left without a vehicle to service the route. It caused suffering and hardship in Tobago. There was a shortage of food, and as the grocery shelves became empty, what took place was irresponsible and negligent. And even after the Galicia is no longer here, I saw that an allocation was made in the sum of $28 million for the dredging of the government shipping service basin to accommodate the Superfast Galicia. This was from the draft estimates of Developmental Program 2018 at page 124, subhead 828. Madam President, I'm asking, why are they allocating so much money for the dredging of the port? And it gets worse after, Madam President, after the departure of the Superfast Galicia, leases were issued for the Atlantic Provider and the Trinity Explorer. The Trinity Explorer is being leased for $8,000 per day, and the Atlantic Provider is being leased for US $14,500 per day. US. A total of approximately $18 million was spent in less than 3 months on these two ferries, and not a single agreement was executed. These two vessels were chartered by just a letter of award and a letter of engagement. Nowhere in the world has this ever happened. Then, Madam President, as I've been cautioned, Ms. Charmaine Lewis, she made certain allegations regarding the procurement of...
At this stage, Senator Hussain, I'm going to ask you to move on in your presentation, because there's a lot of what you're saying, members, please, what you're saying, there's a lot of overlap with an inquiry that is going on right now. So I think you should just move on to your other points in your contribution.
I'm guided, please, Madam President. And Madam President, when we look at another issue that was raised in the budget, it was one with the Maxi Taxi Association and the restrictions on the maxi taxis. Madam President, it caused some distress in the country when the minister in his budget presentation indicated, and it was the printed budget documents that we received, there was no mention of the word maxi taxis. The Minister of Finance indicated in his budget presentation that they are going to remove all the restrictions altogether. There will be no restrictions on the ownership of banded maxi taxis. Persons will be able to buy and ban their maxi taxis and drive wherever they please without any restriction. This will open up the public transportation system. The opposition leader in her response pointed out that such a policy was not found in the budget documents. Then on the online version of the budget statement that was uploaded on the Ministry of Finance website, it indicated something else, which was the removal of all restrictions on banded maxi taxis in order to open up the public transportation system. Madam President, I reiterate this point because it shows a lack of planning on the part of the ministers. It is clearly an afterthought in an attempt to find favor with the population, but it backfired. And while the opposition leader was responding to the budget, there were hundreds of maxi taxis lining the shoulder of the highway, making their way into Port of Spain, onto Wrightson Road in a show of unity, and forced as protest action against the decision of the minister. Madam President, a similar attempt was made by then-Minister Jack Warner to remove the restrictions on the registration of maxi taxis, but this was shut down by the High Court. The court found that there was a lack of consultation with the stakeholders. And we see history repeating itself where the various maxi taxi associations have called on the minister to meet and speak with them. I do hope that the minister meets with them and does not form the view that their discussions are academic and puerile. Madam President, on a closer examination of this policy, it gives enough room for monopolization. Then, in the minister's budget presentation, they indicated that there will be the establishment of the ministerial oversight committees, which is to be chaired by the Prime Minister to monitor and expedite the process of obtaining building approvals from all regulatory agencies. The minister also indicated a $100,000 cash incentive per house would be given to the developers. Madam President, it begs the question whether this committee would now be able to relax regulations and procurement rules. Further, the minister indicated that incentives would be granted to farmers in the sum of $100,000 with a budgetary allocation of $200 million. While I'm of the firm view that farmers should be supported, such funds must be dispersed equitably. And similarly, the increased incentives for hoteliers under the upgrade program for hotels from 25% to 50% for the cost of work per room, which would mean an increase in the maximum reimbursement limit from $750,000 to $1.5 million. I ask that this deal also be done transparently, and this is a further call that the procurement legislation be implemented so that it can have oversight over this grant. As such, Madam President, we need this legislation in order that we would not come here year after year, budget presentation after budget presentation, to hear that we have to be in a deficit budget, as Senator Mahabir and Senator Shriki-Soon has indicated that we have been in deficit budget for over 10 years. Madam President, with a cut down in the corruption, we can now save money. We can get the value for money that the government is talking about. So that we can save the money and we can allocate it to the sectors in society that really needs it. So that, as my friend here, Senator Haynes, would have said, that we would no longer have URP doctors. We would now have full-time doctors, so that when we go to the hospitals and the health centers, we can be serviced effectively and immediately. We would no longer have persons dying in these medical facilities because of a lack of medical treatment or drugs. Yes. Madam President, we must be cognizant of the situation that Trinidad and Tobago is in, and we must curtail the corruption. We must save, we must get our value for money. In conclusion, Madam President, we have reached a time in our nation's history where there is a steady decline in the oil and gas revenue. The nation's vitals are low. There is a cure to clot the hemorrhage that our treasury does not bleed out due to the injury sustained by the chronic disease of corruption. And that cure is the implementation of the procurement legislation. And Madam President, there's a changing of the paradigm. And that change will come soon as the United National Congress return to government to restore good governance and prosperity to Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you, Madam President.
Honorable Senators, I wish to congratulate Senator Hosein on his maiden contribution. Senator Small.
Thank you very much, Madam President, for giving me the opportunity to join in this debate. This wonderful day that we have here. I'm always, Madam President, as I normally say here, Madam President, I come here and I'm privileged to be here. And I take the opportunity that I have to be here, that I'm given, very seriously. Trinidad and Tobago is in a place where we have real challenges. And I will likely feel like my other colleagues in covering all the various issues, but I'm going to try to hit issues that are important to me. Madam President, I just want to begin because we have to understand the framework. And I always try to deal with issues from the perspective of the normal, because I'm a normal, regular person in Trinidad and Tobago. Outside of these chambers, I'm just every man. And, you know, I go back to an article written by Professor Tennyson Joseph of the Barbados Nation in March 2016, and I want to quote. And he said that there's empirical basis for being made for the prevalence of anti-incumbency as Caribbean governments make themselves agents of capital accumulation rather than agents of people advancement. What he's saying, Madam President, is that there's a process going through in the Caribbean region where governments are not being incumbent. At the next election, they're being voted out. And it's part of his thesis is that it's because rather than dealing with people advancement, they're dealing with wealth accumulation for a small sector of the society. And it's an interesting read. I recommend anybody to read it. Madam President, I've looked at the budget. I think the government made an effort to spread the burden as would have been said. And I believe that while we will always have particular issues about the way in which things happen, I believe that they made a start. And if you don't like it, well, tough. Yeah? Come with some new ideas. And I have one or two suggestions, Madam President, if you'll permit me. Yeah. I am always concerned, Madam President, that we live in a society where there's a permanent waiting game for the government to fix everything. I just don't get that. I think that I'm on record as saying that there are several so-called business people in this country, their whole business model is to sit and wait to get a government contract. That is not a business model. And I'm not saying that is wrong. All I'm saying is that if everybody wants to do that, then it places an undue burden on the government. And these are things that we have to drive the entrepreneurial spirit, but there's a cause for it, why we are here. Madam President, if you forgive me, if someone were to have a baby and you continue feeding them with the spoon, and you never teach them to hold the spoon, they will probably grow up to be an adult and not know how to feed themselves. And it's not necessarily a fault of the parent, it's about our particular circumstances. So, Madam President, I believe there's no magic wand that the government can wave to fix the problems that we have. I think that they've put a package of measures, some are palatable, some are less palatable. But if there's other solutions for how we could move forward, I'm sure the government will be receptive to at least hearing them. I looked at several incentives, in particular the housing one is very interesting. But I note, and I note with interest that the Prime Minister, the Honourable Prime Minister, will be chairing it and putting a time frame on it, because I think that's how that has to work. That actually raises a sore point with many business people in this country, Madam President. And what I would call the glacial pace of approvals. It moves at a glacial pace many times. And the tendency is that you're working in a system and every possible red herring that could come up in an approval system comes up. And rather than something taking a finite period of time, the time period gets expanded. And that is something that we have to work on, because it's a disincentive to investment. Yeah. It's a disincentive to investment. And Madam President, we seem to be also married as a country to large projects. I like large projects. Everyone likes large projects. But small and medium projects have a role too. And while the large project proposals will always get the attention of the powers that be, the other small and medium struggle to get their attention. So that there has to be some way in which we try to facilitate all the people who want to do investment in Trinidad and Tobago. I will come to my point about the current level. I'm going to be, Madam President, you know I always say that I come and I try, and I deliberately try to not be difficult and to try. But I believe that we have to look at the way in which public sector costs and subsidies and transfers, we have to hold on to that bear. We have to grab that by the horns, because it's already getting away from us. And I do not subscribe to the view that it is a sacred cow and it absolutely cannot be touched. There has to be a way to deal with it, because all we're doing is continually feeding the beast, and the beast gets bigger and bigger, and all we're doing is pushing out the action and making the action harder and more unpalatable. There has to be a strategy around it. Aside from probably NGC and sometimes Petrotrin and probably flour mills, really few of these state enterprises bring anything back to the state. And coming from me, this next point is going to be interesting, because I'm an advocate for the small person, but we have to be careful. I've listened to the argument that's been made out by several parties, that we have to be careful about supporting a system where it's argued you're transferring wealth from the private and productive sector to the public sector, where efficiency and effective service delivery are not necessarily, it's not uniform across the system. And in fact, in many places, service delivery is not what you want it to be. The next section on my contribution, Madam President, I'm going to deal with is what I call the hard truths. Accept the realities. Everyone in Tobago is wedded to maintaining the status quo. And I understand the Honourable Minister of Finance, the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance. I understand about trying to keep the ship of state and I understand that. The challenge we have is that we have a very weak manufacturing sector. I think the last time I spoke about this, there was a nice ad by the TTMA saying Senator Small doesn't know what he's talking about. And I would always refer them to an article by Anthony Wilson. And I will quote from that article, February 26, 2015. This is recommended reading for anybody to understand why we have a challenge with the manufacturing sector in this country. And I quote, he says, the point is that in practice, there are few local companies that are interested in becoming globally competitive because they are doing just fine being locally and regionally competitive. And he further expounds that the reasons for that include that they are domiciled in a country which offers them a lot of subsidies, a relatively low tax rate, and then critically, their owners are among TNT business elites, which allow them to privilege access to the political elite, and more importantly, the corporate information. It's not me saying it, I'm just reading from a quote. It's recommended reading, because this is an analysis of what is going on in manufacturing. And I'm not saying it can't be fixed, but we have, Madam President, if you want to fix a problem, we must acknowledge and first say that there's a problem. If you go along with blinders that, the manufacturing sector just needs incentives and it will be fixed, no. There's a problem. There's a deep-rooted problem about lack of the ability to compete. Madam President, regardless of what we try to do with the public sector and the state sector, improvements in productivity and efficiency have to be driven. We have to get more value for money. We have to, or not necessarily more. We want fair value. Let me just say more. We want people who come to work to give 8 hours work and give the productivity that's required. We're not asking for anything more than that. I think that has to be driven through the system. Our entire system, the public service system, probably is past its what's called its sell-by date. I think that I, for one, understand the reality of having an independent system to protect the civil servants from that, from the buffer, from the politicians. But I have a good example, and I'm glad the Ministry of Finance is here. I was one of the good souls that went to the valuation office and dropped off my phone. So here's my experience. I have an acknowledgement from them that they received my documents. It's dated on the document 17th of July. It's dispatched on the 16th of August, and I received it yesterday. So you work in a system where it takes 3 months to send something. The system is broken. It's broken. And we have to admit that the system is broken, and how it's currently set up is not going to continue to work. Yeah? And we have to do something about it. We have to grab that bear and say, listen, let's get all the various parties who are the stakeholders, and let's have a discussion about how we could fix this. We can't just say, well, let's entrench in the Constitution. We can't touch it. It's a sacred cow. I militate against that. And my civil service colleagues will know that I've been outspoken on this. If there's one thing people know me for as a civil service, it's delivery. I used to deliver. Whatever was required, and the best quality possible, I used to deliver. I have a good colleague yesterday, he could vouch for me. When it came, he says, Mr. Small, we need so and so. I'm on it, you will get it. And it used to work both ways. The energy markets. Madam President, I listened intently to the Minister of Energy yesterday, Honorable Minister of Energy, and he hit all of the issues that I was going to hit. So I think that's his projection by the Minister of Finance, and I think this is something we need to understand, Madam President. The projection for the oil price by the Minister of Finance, there's a team at the Ministry of Energy who supports this calculation. I was part of that team. We would have conversations with our colleagues at OPEC, or colleagues at the GECF, or colleagues at the EIA. I would pick up the phone, send an email. There's not a number plucked out of the air. The number that is generated and produced and given to the Ministry of Finance as the ministry's recommendation for the oil price goes through a rigorous process. So that when I see the number and I do my own checks, $52 is okay. I have no problems with it because it's in line with all the other major authorities who produce numbers. So that I wanted to deal with that because I don't want people to feel that it's the Minister of Finance plucking a number out of the air. There's a rigorous process that supports that. Yeah? I think also, Madam President, there was one statement in the budget that I said, listen, somewhere along there, when the minister was reading his budget, he referred to very low energy prices. And I just want us to be clear about what we're saying there. I recall, the Honorable Minister of Energy would recall, we did something called the CARICOM Oil Facility in 2004, where Trinidad and Tobago agreed to help our colleagues in the Caribbean by creating this fund. And you know what the trigger price was for that fund to kick in? $30 a barrel. Because at $30 a barrel, our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean were screaming that they were under pressure. $52 a barrel today, I just checked with the Bloomberg before I started, is not a bad price. It's probably not what we want, but in the context of where, if you look at the data, from the day that WTI started in 1946, to yesterday, or not yesterday, to last Friday, forgive me, the long-term average, weighted average, inflation-adjusted price of WTI is $44. So that all that's happened is oil price has retreated. There are several reasons, but it's retreated closer back to its long-term average. Yeah? So that, perhaps, you forgive me, Madam President, I'm a student of the data, and I always like to make sure that we understand the data and what we're talking about. So for the first time, Madam President, oil did not hit $40 a barrel until 2005. You know, we operating $52 a barrel is not a low oil price. The first time in the history of oil prices that oil got to $40 was in 2005. Okay, the first time oil, and it went on a progression thereafter. The first time it hit $50 was 2006, and then 2007 went to $70. And there was this golden period between 2008, 9, 10, 11, where it was in the $90 range. That has never happened in the history of oil prices. It is a golden period in oil prices. Yeah? Now that we're back to middling numbers, let's not call it a low oil price scenario. It is just what the price is now. Yeah? And we went through a period where, for several reasons, the prices went up way out of their normal. So I always have my data, so in case anybody, I have my data. I tend not to play with that. So, Mr. Vice President, also, Madam President, forgive me, I think that the outlook for oil prices is interesting because there's several forces at work. If we go back to when, in 2014, when prices started to collapse, the gap between global oil consumption and global production was showing that consumption was exceeding production by about 2 million barrels per day, a little more than that. As of the last OPEC report, just about a week ago, that gap had narrowed to about 400,000 barrels a day. So that the overhang or extra supply in the market has been removed for a series of reasons, and that is in spite of the increase in shale oil production. So that all of the prognosticators are projecting a gentle increase in prices in the medium term. But I am not going to forecast anything other than I will continue to look at the numbers. I just want to talk quickly on one issue that came up. I remember attending the Hyatt function, and I think one of the presenters spoke about peak oil and peak demand. And I want us to get our minds clear on that. Peak oil was a phenomenon at the time. A lot of people signed on to it. And it was the argument that oil production would begin a long-term decline and cause havoc in the world that was completely dependent on oil. So that everybody is dependent on oil, and then oil would reach a peak in production, and then it would be declining forever, so that when it gets there, there's going to be chaos around the world. Everybody's going to try to get more of a depleting supply. All of a sudden, shale came on, and that was, as my colleague Senator Henry would say, debunked. Peak oil has been thrown away and consigned to the dust heap of economic theory and history. The new article of faith is something called peak demand. And peak demand is different. Peak demand is based on the fact that new technologies, including electric cars, will make oil obsolete. Not that there won't be oil around, it's that new technologies and renewables would make oil obsolete. And that oil production is not going to decrease, but the world is growing greener, we're all environmentally sensitive, and all of these other wonderful things. But the challenge with that is we're finding more and more oil around the world. And if oil remains at the kind of prices where it is now, oil will continue to be in demand. It doesn't mean that it will slow the pace of any adoption of electrics and other things. But unless some radical changes happen, there will always be a demand for oil and oil products. And given the current projections for the availability of oil products going forward for the next 100 years, oil will continue to rule the roost. And there's a cost factor also in terms of electrics are wonderful, electric vehicles are wonderful, but where is the electricity being generated? Where does it come from? You know, where does it come from? The Honorable Minister of Energy is knowing where I'm going, so I'm going to stop there on that. My next topic, Madam President, is what I call the haves and the have-nots. Madam President, the gap between those who have and those who don't in this country is worrying. I would have recounted my experience of going to my local supermarket. My neighbor in front of me here would know where I would normally go. And it's something that I've seen more and more. You know, when you go to the supermarket and you stand in line and someone is ahead of you, and every item that is being cashed, they ask the cashier for the total because they have a finite sum of money to purchase, and they're buying the most basic goods. You know, they cash a big bottle of oil, and then they tell a little child, no, tell the girl to take it off, go and get a smaller. But people are operating with finite amounts. And that is something that we have to be sensitive to. There are a lot of people in this country who are operating on a finite or very low budgets, and that when we impose charges or additional things on them, it hurts them. It hurts them. And I want to quote from the U.S. Economic Weekly in an article published on October the 13th, and it states that incomes rising unevenly has implications for growth. Because there's a clear link that points that for every extra percentage point in total income that the top 10% of earners take home, real consumer spending growth decreases by a percentage. It has been observed that countries with the highest income inequality are countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. Advanced countries, on the other hand, display lower income inequality. And this is where we have to be looking at the size of the middle class in Trinidad and Tobago. I leave the actual numbers to the brilliant economists you have who do that for a living. But my sense is that the middle strata of our society is shrinking. And there's starting to be a super rich portion of the society. And then those at the bottom, that number is getting bigger. And the middle is getting squeezed. It's getting squeezed. And we need to have somebody, and the CSO is not as functional as I would like it to be, because I couldn't get the data I wanted, but that demands someone to start to look at that, because things are happening in society, and we don't understand why. It seems irrational, some of the things that are happening, but we need to look at that. Oil and gas revenues, Madam President, what I call a double-edged sword. We have to admit that while we have oil and gas, it's a double-edged sword because it has caused or relieved the pressure on manufacturing industries to be really competitive or innovative. There's enough research, Madam President, out there by the IMF and other parties showing that how the effect of subsidies masks the true profitability of businesses, and it sends fake or distorted signals to the economy. If you strip out the effect of these subsidies, that's the only way you'll get a truer picture of the performance of some so-called profitable companies. And there was a particular author, Dr. Veronique Derugui. She did an excellent piece in her contribution to the US Congress on this whole issue of having subsidies in the system and the fact that having subsidies, companies are reporting profits, but those profits are not real. They're not real. They're not based on the performance of the company. If you strip out the subsidies, it shows that those companies are actually poor companies. And my concern with Trinidad and Tobago is, now that we're removing a lot of those subsidies, some of those so-called profitable entities will fall. They will fail. They will fail. And it's because they just don't know how to compete. They've been riding on the subsidies, and none of them will probably admit it. Madam President, Trinidad and Tobago still has one of the lowest electricity rates in the Western Hemisphere, save and except for Venezuela, which is a special case. Corporation taxes have been very low. For those who get natural gas for their industry, they get it at a peppercorn rate. It is virtually free. Those who use natural gas in their processes, water rates are still very low. Diesel transportation is starting to come to a real price, but for a long time they've ridden on that. So after all of this, Madam President, how come we don't have a competitive international export business in this country with all of these things in place? Madam President, I will share with you, the Honorable Vice President and I and some other members of the parliamentary conference in Bahamas last year. And during the discourse with several of our colleagues on the Bahamas team, the host team, we were talking about the differences in the economies. And they were talking about that project being done in Bahamas called Bahama. It's a $3 billion hotel resort. And the particular minister, I don't recall his name, said something that stuck with me. He said, tourism is our oil and gas. And it's something that we have oil and gas. We may be looking at tourism, but when tourism is what feeds you, is what puts food on the table, is what allows you to send your children to school, you approach it differently. You approach it differently. Yeah? This is how my bread and butter. We are not there yet. We're far from there. So those are some things that, and these are hard truths. We have to accept them, that we are not ready. We are not ready. So, Madam President, given the fact that we have spent untold billions supporting manufacturing industries over the past 3 decades, it should have been that in a time like now, we should have been easily to look to them to make a big effort to close the gap and support the sustained growth of our economy. Instead, we have to try to support them again. We have to support them in the good times and to support them in the bad times. When can we rely on them to support us? So I'm sure I'm going to get a news release that Senator Small doesn't know what he's talking about. So he has, because he's just talking, he doesn't understand. We employ thousands of people. Rah, rah. That's fine. They have their view. I'm privileged to have mine. Energy tax regime. My next heading. Madam President, I have noted that the efforts by the Ministry of Energy, stated by the Minister of Finance, I support the new royalty regime. I understand, and we have to stop getting politics into everything. A decision was taken at a particular point in time to remove or change the structure, and there were negative effects for it. Why can't that be admitted? You can say that those particular changes spurred investment. Okay, fine. There's no argument with that from me. But there was also a negative effect to that. So that's all that I am saying. I have tried to stay away from it because I realize it's a political issue. You said you needed to, there was no investment for a period. We gave the incentives. Yes, there was investment. But in addition to the investment, there were carried forward losses that will take us for the next 6 to 7 years. That is a fact. That's not something that someone is making up. So I'm not saying good or bad. Let's just accept what it is. And that in trying and accepting what it is, I think that we're trying to claw back some of that. And I am supportive of those measures. Yeah, and that's all it is, from where I sit, Madam President. Domestic gas market. The Honorable Minister of Energy spoke to a couple of issues there. It is what it is. We have challenges. We're Juniper, truck, other things coming on. We're hoping to get that going anyways. But I have a peeve, Madam President. In another hat in this building, Madam President, I am on the State Enterprises Committee dealing with state enterprises. And I'll be careful, Madam President. The National Gas Company came before this entity last year, and the report is laid to the recommendation of public information. One of the challenges with the industry now is transparency of information. One of the recommendations proposed by the Joint Select Committee was that the NGC do a frequent or a quarterly release on the status of the gas industry in Trinidad and Tobago. What is the status of supply and demand? That is a recommendation that's almost a year old, and so far, zero action. It flies in the face of trying to bring some order to the system. And this is the question that I always get. So, Senator Small, what's the point of having these entities come and only make recommendations? What, they do anything? This is why people ask me that. So a year and something later, the NGC has refused or forgotten or not seen the recommendation of the Standing Committee of the Joint Select Committee. And these are the things that bug me, because otherwise the effort in the Joint Select Committee to sit and do the inquiry and to say, listen, I don't see what is the harm. The NGC to put out a quarterly or half-yearly status. This is what the status of the industry is. This is what we expect. This is the forecast. I don't see that being difficult or breaking any contract confidentiality. But they've steadfastly ignored our recommendations. And that brings me to another issue, Madam President. I call it challenge of governance. Madam President, we have, and I will be guided, and I want the Honorable Minister and the Minister of Finance to help me. We have state enterprises and we have directors on boards and chairmen. My understanding, having been in that portfolio myself, is that you're a non-executive director. Am I correct or am I incorrect? They're non-executive directors. But, Madam President, given my experience in the State Enterprises Committee, you have a situation where you have non-executive directors and chairmen running roughshod over the management. And no one seems to want to be able to deal with it. And I'm choosing no one seems to want to be able to deal with it. If you go to it's a real issue. You have chairmen and directors instructing the management. You have chairmen and directors inserting themselves into active negotiations. The Honorable Minister and the Minister of Finance understands governance. And that is a complete breach of all governance standards. You are non-executive director. You take the report from the executive. You don't sit in the room and negotiate contracts. That's not supposed to happen. But we see it happening all the time. And I am amazed that no one is talking about it. Because it seems that it is not happening. But I'm talking about it. Because it's wrong. It's wrong. And if we go to the wonderful, we have the State Enterprises Manual, it states exactly the roles of the chairman, and there's nothing about being involved. In fact, it states you're not supposed to be in the day-to-day running of the business. You have chairman and boards of directors coming and sitting in the office of 8 to 4, Monday to Friday. That is not the intent. And no one seems to want to touch it. And someone earlier spoke about corruption, Madam President. There's no corruption in Sri Lanka because nobody in Mecca jail has it. Until somebody in Mecca jail has no corruption. It doesn't exist. Oh, I'm coming to that, and Raj, I have a whole pile of things to say on that. So, Madam President, I just want to read into the record, because perhaps so that the public knows, so the state, the people in the road and the street and whoever listening or watching, that it, and I want to quote from the Institute of Directors in the UK, a non-executive director is member of a company's board of directors who is not part of the executive team. A non-executive director does not engage in the day-to-day management of the organization. Okay? I want to read from the State Enterprises Performance Manual, the functions of our chairman. Perhaps some of them don't know about this. They need to be educated. I recall being a chairman, a member of a state board, and this was the Bible, the functions and the roles of directors and chairmen. They are not to be involved in the day-to-day running of the business. But this seems to be the norm. And well, it's absolutely wrong, but it is happening, and I'm seeing it happening. So all I can say, Madam President, I'm drawing it to the attention of the powers that be. We have a failing state sector, and part of the reason is that governance has completely collapsed. Governance has collapsed. Yeah? And if governance has collapsed, you don't want to understand what is happening lower down in the system. If governance at the top has collapsed, lower down, bad things are happening. And that's the reality. So we need to fix the governance and say, chairman and directors, your role is this. And it's well spelled out here. Madam President, can you tell me how much time I have again? I run out of 9 minutes. I just want to touch one quick issue on the whole issue of transparency again. Madam President, we have an LNG industry in this country. The Honorable Minister knows it's a peeve of mine. But we have to understand, I've always talked about, we have to understand the size of the pie. I went to a couple of websites. I went to the Australian, what's it called? Petroleum Department of Government of Environment and Energy. They can show you all the countries that their various LNG operators exported to, and then the value. I go to Qatar. I go to TASWEEK website. TASWEEK in Qatar, they have an interesting model where, while they have the LNG companies and they have the oil producer arm, they have a state arm called TASWEEK, who does all the marketing. So your role is to produce oil, your role is to produce LNG. We market it, and that's managed by the Minister of Finance. But you can go on their website and say, this is the product that was sold in this week, where it went to, and the value generated. That should be public information. Somebody, Minister of Finance, probably, or Minister of Energy knows, but we don't understand what's happening in the industry. Why? Because we don't have the information available, and I believe that should be available. So I'm doing good for time. Madam President, the subsidy removal is something that I have advocated for. I support the subsidy removal, but I'm not supportive of the way in which it was done. I have always argued against this back pocket approach. I prefer a structured approach. I've been on the record here. If you're going to change something that's always been in the system, let's set a target. We're going to reduce it by 90% over 3 years or 4 years so that everybody knows this next budget, this is what's going to happen. And I advocate that's the approach we have to do when we're looking at the whole public sector wage bill. Let's get everybody in the room, agree on a number that we're going to reduce it by, and organize a structure to get done, rather than trying to do everything in one fell swoop or in disorganized bumps. Because it causes people to have a lot of uncertainty. And we're in a place now where we need certainty. Revenue leakages. BIR has to step up its game. There's systematic, decades-old failure to collect taxes. How many of us have gone to doctors or dentist offices and there's a nice sign saying cash only? How difficult is it for the BIR or whoever to go and say, where's your records? And I'm talking not little small doctors, I'm talking doctors in nice big fancy buildings with big car parks and cash only. We have to fix those issues. Minister of Finance could have been really difficult and told every maxi taxi driver driving a bus route, if you want to get a bus route past the next quarter, bring your quarterly tax return that you filed. They could have been difficult. I'm not advocating that you do that. but we have to understand that there's a pile of people in the system who are not contributing their share to the tax pie, and we have to find a way to catch them. I think my colleague, who's not here today, suggested that, if someone comes for a food badge, ask them the same question. I said, well, that will cause problems. I wanted to go to one of my final topics, Madam President. I call it daylight robbery. I call it daylight robbery, Madam President. And I want to quote, Madam President. This is a definition from Fraser's organization, and the quote is, daylight robbery, this term is not used to describe actual robberies, whatever the time of day it might take place. It is a figurative phrase that associates an instance of unfair trading with actual robbery. Not just any old robbery, but one that is unashamed and obvious, so unashamed and so obvious that it is committed in broad daylight. Madam President, I was engaged in a nice discussion with someone yesterday, and who was suggesting to me that we have to be careful demonize. Thank you very much, Madam President. That's enough time. That we should be careful about demonizing the banks. And Madam President, I listened. I like to listen. But I am not demonizing the banks. The banks do that for themselves. That by their way in which they do that by themselves. So I am not demonizing the banks. The banks are demonizing themselves because they're probably demons. Because I know for sure they have a head schemer. They have a head schemer who's looking at the wonderful government's 5% additional tax and finding a way to make sure that regular bankers, regular persons pay for it. That's the reality. So I'm happy for the Honorable Minister of Finance that you will get additional revenues. But here's what. We, all of us, pay for it. And it's because the central bank has you have the things in there to go and have the conversations. But we all twinkle toes. I was afraid to touch the banks because what? I have no idea. And there's a reason, Madam President, why banks are regulated. Because banks do bad things. That's not me saying that they're bad, The record, the international record of banks and how they perform and how they take advantage of their customers is on the record. So I don't have to make it up. It's not Senator Small saying that. That is a fact, an unarguable fact. And that is the reason why banks are regulated in the way they're regulated, to protect citizens. So if I say that they're committing daylight robbery in Trinidad and Tobago, that is a fact. So while I would say that there's a logical explanation for why they have their various charges, where's my logical explanation for when I go to the bank? I had a good experience. I traveled to the UK a few weeks ago. I purchased a couple of hundred sterling currency. I paid 9.4 or something for them. I touched down in London. I go around the next day. I went to the ATM, and I take some cash out to the ATM. I paid 8.6. You pay 9.3 in Trinidad for it, plus wherever. And then when I'm in the UK, so the difference, they're killing us. They're killing us. And nobody wants to talk about it, other than Senator Smokey doesn't know what he's talking about. Madam President, I just want to close with one last issue, and it has to do with the issue of Petrotrin and their measurement issues. And that's how I'm going to treat it, Madam President. We have a situation where Petrotrin is a signatory or a charter member of something called the EITI. But EITI will tell you that they went and they spoke to Petrotrin's contractors, and several of them refused to submit information to the EITI. That is an abomination. If Petrotrin is the head holder of the license and you are working for me, you can't tell the EITI they're refusing to submit information on your production and your revenues. That is something that is easily fixed by the Honorable Minister of Energy. I understand the EITI is pushing for legislation. That's great. That could probably come. But immediately, Petrotrin should be able to say, if you want to continue being a lease operator, you should make sure you report it EITI. That should not be something that works, so that somebody, measurement issues that they're dealing with now, I know it's playing out in the public, and there's all sorts of things happening. I'm not going to delve into it. But at least if we have EITI be able to go in there and verify what company A says they're producing and what revenue they say they're earning, then we may have some independent confirmation of what is going on. And that would be my recommendation, Madam President. So, Madam President, in closing, I won't talk about Rajaratnam or the HU fiasco or the FCB IPO, because nobody seems to want to deal with this because they don't exist. The FCB IPO never happened. Nobody will ever be charged. When I apply for my 1,000 shares, this is Mr. Small, you're going to get 500, somebody else get 500,000 shares. That's wrong, but nobody cares. Man making money, everybody is absconded, and we forget about it, and life goes on in wonderful Trinidad and Tobago. And that is what we used to hear. And nobody seems to want to touch it, so I am starting to get tired of it. Because obviously, nobody is taking me on. Madam President, as I close, for I am convinced, Madam President, that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God, and that is Jesus Christ our Lord. That is Romans 8:38-39. Madam President, every day I wake up, I make my peace with the Father. I give thanks for the ability to do what I am able to do. I love Trinidad and Tobago. I want us to understand that this is a place where we have the ability to turn things around, but all of us have to contribute and contribute fully. And that's what I am trying to do, Madam President, in my own little way. I make my sacrifices and I try to stay on the narrow road. So, Madam President, with those few words, I want to thank you for the opportunity I have to be here to contribute.
Minister, Trade and Industry.
Thank you, Madam President. And let me just start by thanking the Minister of Finance and the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, all of the public officials who worked very hard in constructing a budget, which for the most part has been palatable and well accepted by the population. And it is under this government, led by the Honourable Keith Rowley, it's left to us now to put this country on a sustainable path of growth, and that, in fact, we will do. Just to reinforce and to respond to Saddam Hussein, Senator Hussein, we are ready, and we are in fact ready. I'm here to hear of alternate budget prescriptions from the opposition, Madam President, but I'm still waiting. But I will respond. I'll respond to them during the course of my presentation. The Ministry of Trade and Industry has been really concerned with 4 core areas, Madam President. Reforms, which so many of you have spoken about and which the public speaks about on a daily basis. Diversification, trade and exports, and investments. And the cry of the business people, and indeed anybody accessing services from the government, the cry is always, it's too bureaucratic, it takes too long. And hence the reason the area of focus on reforms in the Ministry of Trade and Industry. And I go on, I'm very heartened by the results of the World Economic Forum's Global Competitive Index of 2017, where Trinidad and Tobago moved from 94th out of 138 countries in 2016 to 83rd in 2017. And this is the highest rank that this country has achieved since 2010. In fact, we are now where we were when the PNM left office. And this is, of course, due to improvements and strengthening of our institutions, our health and higher education, our goods and labor markets efficiency, our financial market development, technological readiness, market size, and business sophistication. But I want to make reference, Madam President, to one particular area under the Global Competitive Index, and that's the area of institutions. I will answer some of the questions posed by Senator Hussein. And I look to the section called institutions, and may I report on some of the rankings. So from 2015, under diversion of public funds, we've gone from a low of 124 up to 102. Under public trust in politicians, we've gone from 128 up to 111. We've gone under irregular payments and bribes from 104 in 2015 up to 95. We've gone from favoritism in decisions of government officials from 137, a low of 137, up to 120. Wastefulness of government spending, we've gone from 112 up to 91. And transparency of government policy making, we've gone from 90 up to 72. And Senator Hussein, I ask you, is this the governance, is the good governance and transparency to which you were speaking of? I don't think so. I don't think so. This is a Global Competitive Index, World Economic Forum 2017. And you can go back and examine those figures. Facts are facts. And this is why we are so focused on reforms, Madam President. And there are 5 areas of reforms in the Ministry of Trade and Industry that we're working on. The ease of doing business, the operationalization of a new investment facilitation framework, building on our single electronic window, implementing the WTO trade facilitation agreement, and generally improving the policy environment. And on improving the ease of doing business, there are several short-term initiatives, and I'll go directly to them. Trading across borders. And let me pinpoint that the fixed container scanner at the Port of Spain and the Port of Port of Spain will finally be operationalized by this PNM government before the end of calendar 2017. And this will immediately reduce the time and cost of importing and exporting goods, and will also serve as a buffer against the movement of illegal and illicit goods. Starting a business. This process to start a business will be re-engineered, and all of the manual applications will be phased out over 12 months. The current online system takes no more than 3 days, but the manual system takes as long as 10 days. We are going to phase that manual system out. Dealing with the construction permits. An automated system will be developed, and when implemented, will reduce the administrative burden for obtaining a construction permit. There will be a pilot project in the city of Port of Spain, and by October 2018, we expect this to be in place in Port of Spain, after which the national rollout will commence in 2019. Resolving insolvency, an official supervisor of insolvency was permanently appointed in June 2017, and this will now allow the insolvency and bankruptcy legislation to be properly implemented. Under the medium-term reforms under ease of doing business, electronic payments, which we spoke about this morning. The ministry is working with the Ministry of Finance, the Treasury Division, on developing an electronic funds transfer framework which will allow the government to make and receive electronic payments and provide the public and the consumers with a more efficient and convenient and safer electronic funds transfer environment. And Madam President, a technical consultant is expected to begin work with the Treasury Division in 2017 to implement all of these changes. Madam President, there's another framework of reforms, and this is the investment facilitation framework which Cabinet agreed to in April 2017. And the key objectives of that framework is to facilitate investors in need of regulatory compliance with national laws and regulations. And this is going to simplify the entire process, the entire regulatory decision process, and provide pre-approval services and facilitate post-approval services as well. And a key component of this framework is a Cabinet-appointed interministerial committee to improve the processing times involved in approving and facilitating investments, particularly in the non-energy sector. And I can tell you that this is working well, and the obvious objective is to improve the quality and speed of service delivery in the public sector. There are some other main reforms under this area that is being done already. And implementation, as I said, has commenced and will be completed, we estimate, by January 2019. I'm giving this Honourable House the commitments. And by example, e-visas and visa waivers and visa exemptions. This system will be implemented by June 2018 and will reduce the service standard from the current 2 weeks to a 1 to 3 day period. The work permit module on TT-Biz Link, we expect to phase out all manual applications by March 2018. Another area of reform is building the national single electronic window for trade and business facilitation. And I'm pleased to report that there are now 46 e-online services. There have been 1.1 million transactions with over 8,000 registered users from over 2,700 companies. And TT-Biz Link, I want to say, was the brainchild of the PNM in 2009. So in 2017, we launched the e-mobile inspection, and this involves a number of government agencies, the TTBS, the Plant and Quarantine Services, Food and Drugs Inspectorate, Also, the e-maritime service module was expanded in 2017, and this involves the Maritime Services Division, the Coast Guard, port administrations, allowing the shipping agents to submit vessel and pre-arrival and departure declarations to the Maritime Services Division. There was also the e-utilities module, which is launched, and this is to enhance and to include digital sampling. TT BizLink, as you know, was given international recognition, and they were awarded the Excellence in Electronic Government, Excel Government, in December 2016 by the Network of E-Government Leaders of Latin America and the Caribbean. This TT BizLink project is now being expanded, and coming out of this, there will, in fact, be a more modern trade and business legislative framework which allows for businesses to operate in a more efficient manner. And this consultancy will commence in January 2018 and be completed in November 2018. Also, business process re-engineering services. We will re-engineer and modernize the main import-export procedures administered by the ministry, by the ports and regulated agencies, chemistry, food and drugs, and Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards. And this consultancy will commence in November 2017 and be completed in September 2018. Also, an integrated risk management system to assist border agencies in conducting inspections more intelligently and efficiently, whilst ensuring trade compliance. And this contract will be expected to be awarded in December 2017 and the project completed by December 2018. There are also considerable reforms under the Trade Facilitation Agreement, and these activities relate to the legislative, the procedural, the regulatory reforms, all geared towards the creation of a more reliable and efficient and cost-effective trade environment. There are the policy initiatives under the Ministry of Trade, including our national e-commerce strategy, which we expect will be introduced in another month or so. And through this e-commerce strategy, government will focus, again, on the implementation of an electronic funds transfer framework. And by the way, that electronic funds transfer framework will be accommodated under the expansion of the single electronic framework as well. And in keeping with this, in keeping with making this, ensuring that this e-commerce strategy is indeed a success, there will be the full proclamation of all the necessary legislation, including the Data Protection Act and the Electronic Transactions Regulations Act, and also the enactment of the cybercrime legislation. I want to go to diversification because this is very, very important as we seek to transform our economy. And I know that there are some concerns raised by Senator David Small about the manufacturing sector. It still remains a very, very healthy sector, employing more than 50,000 persons. We are the largest manufacturers in the region, and our products are being exported to more than 100 countries throughout the world, a variety of products. And we want to expand that from products to products and services as well. But and there is, in fact, a roadmap for diversification. And but let me stick with the manufacturing for now. Senator Small, perhaps what you're thinking of is the very narrow, large manufacturers that are already well known to all of us. But we want to expand that to include small and medium-sized manufacturers as well. And therefore, the focus is there. So in addition to those incentives which were given by the Minister of Finance, Cabinet has approved for the Ministry of Trade and Industry using funds from export TT, funds held on account. No need to go back and dig into the Treasury. Funds held on account. They've agreed this grant fund facility. And what this is a $25 million grant fund facility for the purchase for strictly small and medium-sized businesses under a threshold of revenue of turnover, I'll say about 18 million per annum. So you're talking really small and medium. And this fund really is to support these small and medium-sized export-oriented entrepreneurs, and import substitution-geared businesses in manufacturing and in also agro-processing. And there are a number of areas within agro-processing and manufacturing that we'll be focusing on. I can name some of them, but this project will be launched in the first week of November, and all of the details will be available then. But under agro-processing, we'll be focusing on cocoa processing, vegetable and fruit processing, food packaging, agricultural equipment manufacturing, agricultural chemical manufacturing, oil extraction, dehydration, meat and fish processing, floriculture, sauces and canning, to name some of them. And under manufacturing, food and drink processing, textile, garments, footwear and headwear, chemical products, including cleaning items, beauty and personal care, environmentally friendly packaging, and again, further details will be rolled out. So these grants will cover up to 50% of the cost of machinery and equipment, with a cap of $250,000 per firm. $250,000 per firm in grant funding available through the Ministry of Trade and Industry and Export TT. And as I said, this facility will be launched in November 27. And this is in addition to the $50 million announced by the Minister of Finance for startups and small businesses. In addition, for manufacturers, small, medium, and large, the Exim Bank's portfolio has now been increased by $55 million for in the main trade financing and discounting arrangements for our local export-oriented manufacturers. And you would hear further details of that. In addition, in support of manufacturers, the Central Bank will license the Exim Bank as a foreign exchange dealer for the benefit of eligible manufacturers and exporters. And this facility will be capitalized at $100 million. Additionally, the Ministry Cabinet has also approved a new and improved research and development facility under Export TT. And this new facility will be revised to fund projects in 3 phases. Phase 1, to determine the technical merit and the feasibility and the commercial potential and viability of the proposed project. Phase 2, to continue the R&D efforts, but more specifically to meet relevant costs related to the product development, including the prototype development and so on. And phase 3 will help and assist with the commercialization objectives of coming out from phase 1 and phase 2. And this new R&D facility, of course, is in keeping with the government's efforts to attract high-value, technology-oriented investments, which is in line with our thrust as we enter the 4th Industrial Revolution. And I know the Honourable Leader of the Opposition said that when they assume office, which might be in quito, that they will, in fact, bring on board everyone onto this 4th Industrial Revolution. And I can tell you that our manufacturers, I'm speaking about time, Senator Mark. And I'm speaking about time. I'm talking about perhaps in the year, 3000, so I don't know. Not happening, right? But what I'm saying to you about the 4th Industrial Revolution is that our manufacturers are already involved in robotics. If you don't know, in robotics and automation, and there's much more involved. And this is why we're doing the research and development project. To support manufacturers again, Cabinet in August 2017 approved the issuance of a head lease of 133 acres of state land at Phoenix Park, quite close to the existing Point Lisa estate, and that's for the purpose of developing a new industrial park for light and high-value manufacturing. And this park will be completed by December 2019. Madam President, all of these new facilities to facilitate new and existing manufacturers, large, small, medium manufacturers as well, from which I can tell you the country will benefit. These institutions will grow. There will be new employment opportunities, and there will be a boost to this country's economy. I now look at the maritime aspect of it, for which the ministry also has responsibility. And of course, our geographic location puts us here in the Caribbean, where there's a distinct advantage of being below the hurricane belt. And in addition to that, we do in fact have a very educated and diverse workforce, and we do have competitively priced utilities. All advantages which will help this particular industry to grow. Madam President, work has been going on with the Standing Committee geared to develop the maritime sector under the chairman to my left, Honourable Franklin Cann, and we've focused on particular areas: the ship repair and dry docking, which has significant potential. Right now, there are 3 existing players, and they do ship repairs to 3 different sizes of vessels, and they employ perhaps about 300 persons in their businesses, and the revenues among the 3 of them are in fact in excess of $100 million. But the potential of the industry is enormous, and we are starting with these existing players. All of these persons have come up with expansion plans, and we in the Ministry of Trade and in fact in the committee are ready to facilitate and support these investors and to help their businesses to grow. Their major projects are valued, you wouldn't believe, in excess of $500 million, and these are expected to generate annual revenues in the vicinity of more than $60 to $80 million. And these projects would involve construction and upgrade works, new jetties of varying sizes, new dry docks, and again, we are seeing the potential for significant job appointments. Attached to this is an apprentice program, which the committee had asked for and on which the YTEP has acted. And in December 2016, this maritime apprenticeship program was launched. And what it entails is a full-time 1-year on-the-job training in welding and ship hull fabricating. And as I said, this is between YTEP and Harrydock. And elements of the program will be tested and certified by Lloyd's of London, with graduates receiving YTEP certificates endorsed by both Harrydock and Lloyd's of London. And we expect the continuation of this kind of apprenticeship program. The yachting industry, we are building on the yachting industry. And firstly, let me recognize the Ministry of Finance, who facilitated the VAT exemption for services to foreign yachts as of February 1st, 2017. Madam President, the Ministry of Trade and Industry has submitted to Cabinet, and Cabinet has approved a yachting policy which for the next 5 years, 2017 to 2021. And the main objectives are to improve and expand Trinidad and Tobago's yachting product, and to reform and strengthen the legal and regulatory framework, and to improve the technical capacity in the yachting industry, and to improve the environmental, social sustainability of the yachting industry. So that coming out of this, the Ministry of Trade has come up with a comprehensive implementation plan. And in particular, these are some of the initiatives which we will pursue in 2018 would include the yachting legislation. The Ministry will spearhead the development of yachting-specific legislation, distinct from the current domestic commercial maritime laws here and there. The single harmonized form will in fact which is expected to reduce the time taken to clear customs and immigration from 2 hours to as little as 15 minutes. We are pursuing this with the Ministry of the Attorney General, and we expect it to be in place shortly. A comprehensive yacht marketing and a promotional plan will be developed with a view to encouraging yacht arrivals to Trinidad and Tobago. With regard to marina development, the THA, along with the Standing Committee, are actively pursuing marina development for 1 in Trinidad and 1 in Tobago. The Trinidad and Tobago Yacht Club, I can tell you, one of the oldest and the more well-established marinas in the Western Peninsula, plans to undergo extensive expansion as well. Madam President, Mr. Vice President, finances has always been an issue for many of the persons involved in this industry. And what we've done is we've brought together other institutions away from the traditional local ones. We have brought together other institutions with these stakeholders. For instance, the CAF, which is the Andean Development Bank, and also the IADB, Inter-American Development Bank, regarding to assist with the execution of these projects. And we hope that these 2 entities, the banks and the stakeholders, in fact, gel, and we can see these projects come to fruition soon. The area of transshipment and cold stacking is another area which we find to be lucrative, and new guidelines for transshipment and cold stacking are being finalized by the Ministry of Works and Transport for Cabinet. As a matter of fact, there is in place already the contractual arrangement for the existing ships, 8 of them which are stacked in the Gulf, And I can tell you that this is quite lucrative. Again, the rate which has been approved is $750 US per ship per day, per ship per day for the first 3 years, and $1,000 US thereafter for the next 5 years. With regard to transshipment, we are ideally positioned as a transshipment hub for the movement of metals and iron ore from the east coast of South America to the Asian destinations. And as it is, 160 persons are employed in this transshipment industry, and the contribution to GDP is probably about 47 million US. So we expect that this is an area which can grow. The badly needed maritime spatial plan is being done by the Institute of Marine Affairs, focusing on the internal waters of Trinidad and Tobago, but more so on the Gulf and the Galleons Passage. And again, this is the objective is to have an integrated coastal zone management, which is aimed at maintaining and, when necessary, enhancing the functional integrity of the coastal resource systems. Let me speak to the creative industry. Again, in September 2015, when we came into office, we met Creative TT without a plan, and this was more of a donation agency. And we see much value in this, and I think the opposition has agreed with me, much value in this trillion-dollar industry. So we are focusing on capacity building and on structuring these entities under Creative TT, music, fashion, and film, with very clear and well-formulated plans. Both music and fashion have already completed their strategic plans, and it is that the film plan will be completed by January 2018. Under music, elements of the strategic plan elements of it will be exposed to the public during a national stakeholder engagement, which is scheduled for October 2017 at the Queen's Hall. This is the last day of October, it's on the 30th of October 2017 at Queen's Hall, where the public would be informed, and particularly all of the stakeholders, all of the interested parties, about the key projects which are coming out of the strategic plan and which we will focus on in 2018 going forward. And some of the projects, I'll give you an idea of those that will be launched then. The live music district, much talked about, which is and of course, live music is a fundamental pillar of the global music industry. Music TT has identified the city of Port of Spain for the pilot project of the live music agenda. And the 4 main areas within the city which we are focusing, which we will target, is Ariapita Avenue, Russ Street, the Savannah, and Napa. And why? Because these are high traffic areas with already existing infrastructure, therefore making it cost effective and suitable for live music events. This is going to be, without a doubt, Mr. Vice President, a very exciting and vibrant occasion where our very diverse music will be exposed to all of Trinidad and Tobago and to the world at large. Right? And when fully implemented, this project is expected to increase tourism, revenue, job opportunities, and we see all of these musicians across all of the different music genres having opportunities to commercialize their talent, bring it up to a standard where they can then export their music. It's not just only about soca, it's about all of the music genres as well. This is going to be a key offering for Trinidad and Tobago's tourism strategies and packages. As I said before, this district will be launched. Will be launched on March 1st, 28. And the reason for the time lag is that to develop all of the plans that are necessary with all of the stakeholders, the strategy and implementation plan, the collaborative action plan that is necessary as well, the communications campaigns, and it will kick off right after Carnival and end just before the Parang season. There's also the Artist Development Program commencing in December 2017, and of course the Export Ready Academy, which is not a physical academy, but rather a direct training program for the Artist Portfolio Development Program, which is going to deal with every aspect of music export, and we're talking about performances and touring, stage presence and live vocal training, various types of deals, signings, collaborations, publishing, placements, the development and monetization of an online presence, merchandising, endorsements, and intellectual property. So when Senator Haynes spoke yesterday about we're ready in the music industry, There's not. There's so much capacity building to be done in all. It's just not about singing or so. There's so much more to be done. And that's what the focus will be on capacity building and then ensuring that they're ready for exports. There will be a music tech platform as well, which is an upgrade of the Music TT's website, so that any inquiries with regard to music and all of the resources surrounding music, etc., that's where you're going to head to, that platform. In the area of fashion, the Fashion Value Chain Investment Program was launched in March 2017 by Fashion TT, with 5 designers benefiting: J. Angelique, Cheryl Lochan Das, Ecliffe Eli, Millhouse, and from Tobago, Ted Arthur, Leather Collections. These people, this has been completed. And all of these businesses, most of them have added confirmed streams of new income, and many of them are exporting to new markets: St. Lucia, Antigua, Barbados, and so on. There's going to be this bespoke tailoring program, which will commence in March, on March 1st, 2018. In collaboration with Savile Row and MIC, and with support from the Ministry of Trade and Industry, it is a 1-year certificate program in bespoke tailoring, pattern drafting, cutting, and fitting, facilitated by the famed Professor Andrew Ramroop of the Savile Row Academy. And those participants in the program will, in fact, at the end of the program, have a certificate which is equivalent to the National Vocation Qualifications at Level 4 of the United Kingdom. This program is integral to building export capacity and successfully positioning local tailor-made products in international markets. You talk about diversification. Here it is coming alive. An MOU will be signed in November 2017, as I said. The rollout will be in March 2018. There's also the establishment of the local garment production facility. There was a delay with UTT, but this facility will in fact be opened in March 2018. Under film, the government has approved the extension of the production expenditure rebate program, and we expect we are confident that 4 international productions will in fact be shot in Trinidad and Tobago between November 2017 and February 2018. There's several leads, more than these 4 productions, several leads from all parts of the world. There's going to be a film production directory and the implementation of several projects under the strategic plan when we receive that in January of 2018. Also included will be several training and certification projects and production assistance and script development programs as well. Just so that I can speak a little bit about support for the agricultural sector, Mr. Vice President, in October 2016, the Cabinet approved the development of the new agro-processing and light industrial park at Moruga. Again, we have received the master plan, which provides a blueprint for the successful implementation of the park. And at the end of this, we are going to have a reduction in the food import bill, and we are going to be able to provide exportable, locally manufactured, agricultural-based products. Just to remind this Honourable House as well, with regard to the divestment of the Carsonfield rice mill, that it will soon be out with the old and in with the new, because the Carsonfield divestment process is almost to completion and will be submitted to Cabinet. And once done, the expectation is for a modern parboiled rice milling operation. Just to speak a little bit about our trade and exports. How much more time do I have?
You finish at 11:50.
Sorry?
You finish at 11:50.
9 minutes.
Fine. Just to speak a little bit about our trade and exports. We looked at the balance of visible trade, and of course noted the decline. Exports declined from 40 billion to $33 billion, and we are very concerned about it. So I went actually to the figures. I asked the CSO to give me the statistics as to where the declines actually occurred. And of course, when we speak of these exports, it's both energy and non-energy. So I looked at some of the elements where there was a fall in exports of some products, and really it was with regard to natural gas, fertilizers, chemical elements, iron and steel bar rods, and so on. Of course, we had the departure of ArcelorMittal. But then I looked at where the increases were, and Mr. Vice President, happily they were in the non-energy commodities. Not significant, but this is why we are growing that sector. the manufacturing, the agro-processing, and so on. So that in paper and paperboards, there wasn't a $16 million increase. In chocolate and preparations, a $15 million increase. In materials of rubber, a $10 million increase. In meals, in flour, wheat, etc., and probably national flour mills, an increase of $6 million. In fish, fresh, chilled, and frozen, an increase of $5 million as well. And in rice, this is white rice, $2 million, and so on. And there's overall flat performance, as I said, but we intend to grow this non-energy sector for exports in particular. And so we will continue in the Ministry of Trade and Industry with all of our market presence and other marketing initiatives. And the focus will be, and we're particularly concerned, arising out of those these two storms, catastrophic storms, Irma and Maria, you'll be surprised, affecting Antigua, St. Kitts, and Dominica, Anguilla, BVI, and Puerto Rico. We've lost some key markets for about 6 months until we recovered. And when calculated, we're talking about $2.7 billion of exports we do to these countries. So the point about it is no markets are really secure. So we've got to focus on expanding our markets into Latin America as well. So, and you know the work that we are doing in Cuba, this will continue. We know the very successful mission which we have there. Many of these agencies, including PPGPL, National Petroleum, Trinidad Tissues, many orders have already been received. And our office, our Trade Facilitation Office set up by this PNM government, is working actively to assist. One of our largest conglomerates is already establishing some investments in Cuba's Mariel Economic Zone as well. There was a mission to the Dominican Republic recently by the TTMA and endorsed by the Ministry of Trade and Industry. This is an exciting market for us as well, especially for products like cereals, fertilizers, glass bottles, tissue paper, and so on. Republic Bank held a mission to Ghana and it was supported by the Ministry of Trade and Industry as well.
Would the senator with the offending device please exit the chamber?
I need some injury time,
Senator, you could exit the chamber and turn it off, please. Thank you. Continue.
Mission to Ghana. The exploratory mission to Ghana was a private sector initiative, but supported by the government. We're working on our Venezuela initiative to expand the range of products and also the volume of goods sent to Venezuela. We're also, as you know, we've embarked on discussions for a partial spoke agreement between Chile and the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and that is continuing. With regard to the Panama partial scope agreements, we have recently approved by Cabinet a detailed implementation plan. This is an extensive market for us, and we are going forward with this Panama market. A trade mission to Panama and Costa Rica will be led by the Ministry of Trade, and it is expected to take place in March 2018, with Colombia in mid-2018. There are other supported initiatives, including a national export strategy, which we must get completed in another 3 months, and of course the national quality policy, which has been, which the consultants have submitted to us, and within a month this will be taken to Cabinet. And again, this national quality policy is expected to improve this country's competitiveness and prepare us for an expansion in the area of exports. There are a number of success stories in terms of products, but time does not allow me to, but in particular the Trinidad and Tobago fine cocoa, which Minister of Agriculture spoke of, which is now being sold as a joint product with Harrods, and it's on the shelf in Harrods in London. Also, Twigs Naturals, which is our own Caribbean tea brand, which also won several awards as well. The Global Tea Championship Award for their Caribbean-grown mint and Caribbean Christmas tea. Time? Right. Investment performance. According to the 2017 World Investment Report, the global flows of FDIs has fallen by 2%, and for developing countries, it's declined even more by 14%. But I can tell you, Mr. Vice President, that this government has worked very hard on building investor confidence and laying the foundation for further economic diversification, growth, and sustainability. And it's all local manufacturers who I'm telling you are who are all expending large sums of money, $50 million, and you can check, and I'll detail when I have more time. $50 million here, $60 million here, $30 million there. All of our local manufacturers are investing in plant and machinery and equipment for the future. And in addition to that, our local private sector is doing considerable local investments as well. So you can expect several initiatives to be unfolded by the private sector in the course of 2018 and even starting in 2017. So you can expect a new manufacturer of an assembler of automotive batteries by January 2018, a new manufacturer of juice in 2018. One of our large manufacturers and exporters of confectionery and other products is doing a new factory, and that is another $250 million investment in Trinidad and Tobago. We have a new manufacturer of pepper sauce and condiments, another one coming up in 2018, another one has just started operations or about to start, that's Barron Foods from St. Lucia, about to start soon. Advanced Foam will soon start the manufacture of foam and of fiber pads and pillows for export as well. There's going to be a new state-of-the-art ice cream manufacturing plant, which will come on stream in February of next year. A new state-of-the-art manufacturer of cones, ice cream cones as well. There's going to be a new facility of aluminum doors and windows as well, coming from Antigua. A new hatchery and animal pet food operation will start next year as well. Another new non-alcoholic beverage manufacturing and distribution facility will commence as well in 2018. National Flour Mills will spend $80 million in 2017, 2018, and 2019 to enhance their facility for production of pet food and warehouse expansion and dry mix operation. So, and when I add all of the private sector construction projects that are going on in this country that we're aware of, you're talking about more than $3 billion worth of projects, Mr. Vice President, and employing, we anticipate, more than 2,000 persons as well. And those will be unveiled to the population as they come forward. This government is not in an enviable position. However, we are working. There's a consistent level of transportation being done across all of our ministries over 2018. Which will continue into 2018, Mr. Vice President. I can tell you that the prospect for economic growth is encouraging, and that's because there is stable leadership under this government and under the Honorable Keith Christopher Rowley, our dear Prime Minister. The well-being of our citizens is in good hands, where higher truth exists and where there's integrity. And I want to say that the corrosive days of the UNCs are long behind us.
Before I invite the next speaker, I just wish to reiterate the sentiments of the President of the Senate regarding the devices. I think that we are all in here tech-savvy enough that I can ask you to take a few seconds now and then turn your devices on silent and at least turn the volume down so that if a call comes in or anything happens, it does not disturb the person contributing. So everybody, take a few seconds, check your phones, check your devices, make sure it's on silent, turn the volume down before I invite the next speaker, who is Minister of Foreign and Maritime Affairs.
Mr. Vice President, it is an honor and privilege to be able to make a contribution to this debate on the appropriation bill of this year, 2007. I wish from the outset to congratulate the Minister of Finance and staff personnel at that ministry, the Ministry of Finance, in a very special way for the work and dedication involved in producing such a quality, balanced, proper budget to this honorable House. Truly, Mr. Vice President, the detailed descriptions in meeting the current challenges of our country are highly commendable. I also wish to extend congratulations to the Minister of Planning and Development and indeed staff of that ministry for their contribution to the budgetary exercise. Mr. Vice President, I wholeheartedly support, of course, the Appropriation Bill of 2017. I would like also to say that we are very fortunate in this country to have a leader of the caliber of our Prime Minister, the Honorable Keith Rowley, undertake the responsibilities of Prime Minister of our country. In this regard, respect for the rule of law, unswerving dedication to the equitable and sustainable development of our country, sharing the burden of adjustment, treating in a direct and resolute manner the scourge of corruption, sharing the burden, or rather the burden of adjustment, as I said, accountability across the board, a fair day's work for a fair day's pay, of course, living within our means. These are all traits that come to mind when we consider the action and deeds of our Prime Minister and, of course, our government over the last 2 years. Mr. Vice President, continuing in that vein, I would like to mention that expediency and the recourse to dispensing our patrimony to shore up partisan positions do not find appeal within our government. Ours is one that treats with the concerns of our citizens across the entire country. I also have had the good fortune of working with our Prime Minister at home and abroad, and I can say offhand that his intellect, tenacity, and experience on display continue to serve as an inspiration to contribute to the development of our country. Perhaps I should also add that this admiration and pride is shared among leaders of our country, other countries beyond Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Vice President, demonizing has given way somewhat to quibbling on the margins, grandstanding, and theatrics. Needless to say, this does not banalize the usefulness of constructive contributions from stakeholders. Over the last 2 years, our sober and competent Prime Minister has been steadfast and resolute in nudging us towards a pathway of sobriety, sustainability, equitability, and common sense. Thankfully, citizens of our country as a whole are the arbiters and are very present in our space. It is within this framework that I, as Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, and indeed the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, taken the lead from a collective that of the Cabinet. Mr. Vice President, the annual budget allocation to the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs amounts to $261 million for this year, 2017 to 2018. In the years 2015 to 16, the figure was about 25% less, meaning $353 million. Much of the ministry's allocation is geared towards the payment of rents, leases on buildings, especially in regard to our missions abroad, subscription fees to international organizations, and staff personnel expenditure. Over the past years, the ministry, like so many others, of course, other ministries that is, will have been obliged to reduce discretionary expenditure in order to stay within our allocation. Further, a number of our diplomatic missions abroad are not operating at optimal staffing levels, and we, within such strictures, do what we can in order to maintain the high visibility and representation at international meetings and conferences abroad. I would, at this juncture, like to commend and congratulate and express my appreciation to members of staff of the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs for their ongoing perseverance and hard work in ensuring that within the restraints that we operate, we can still get the job done. Mr. Vice President, we continue to explore additional avenues to reduce expenditure and achieve savings. And it is in this regard that we have established and consolidated a voice over the internet protocol system linking our missions and headquarters, and we have been able to secure substantial savings in this regard. We at the ministry recognizes that globalization has dramatically altered the nature of relationships between domestic and world economies, and Trinidad and Tobago continues to be impacted by these occurrences beyond our control. Therefore, we, at the level of the ministry, continue to explore methods of revenue generation, and the budget for this fiscal year, as expressed and presented by the Honorable Minister of Finance, amply treats with this issue. I would like now to go into some further detail as regards giving account for the ministry's activities during this past year, which clearly reflect how the ministry has stewarded the allocated funds successfully so in maintaining, and as I just said, enhancing this country's regional and hemispheric footprint through the participation and the successful promotion of Trinidad and Tobago's interests around the world. Protocol and consular services are an integral part of the ministry's portfolio, and in this regard, we address the needs of nationals abroad, including, of course, the diaspora, who may sometimes encounter challenges of unforeseen circumstances in a foreign country. We also provide information security, immigration, and deportation issues. We treat with issues of human trafficking, and we provide general guidance on social and cultural initiatives. Further, we provide linkages to the trade and investment sectors within our country. Of course, at our missions, a selected number of our missions, we have immigration services on offer, and in that regard, we process passport and visa applications and process any emergency travel documents that may be required. Over the past year, we would have fulfilled our mandate through assistance to nationals desirous of such assistance and those that are in distress. Of course, recently we would have had to assist in the repatriation of 2 persons, nationals of Trinidad and Tobago, who would have lost their lives in the unfortunate passage of the hurricane in the island of St. Martin. Madam President, I would like to also indicate that an element, an integral part of the ministry's role and function is to safeguard our interests, Trinidad and Tobago's interests, and thus we would have launched recently, in June of this year, a registration system for nationals abroad for both persons who reside abroad and those who are visiting. This allows nationals who to register their stay details online so as to allow us to make easy contact and extend any assistance that may be required. As of September of this year, there would have been in excess of 1,600 registered nationals on the system. Needless to say, the recent events in our region, climatic events that is, demonstrate the need for such a facility in extending our reach beyond our shores in bringing assistance and help to our nationals. Madam President, we also interact at the level of the ministry with many foreign nationals resident here in Trinidad and Tobago. To this end, we will have facilitated the presentation of letters of credence of newly appointed heads of missions, including those from the Federal Republic of Germany, Costa Rica, and Botswana. We, of course, at the level of the government, continue to pursue this goal of deepening relations with other countries in furtherance of advancing our national interests. The ministry also has placed special emphasis on energy-related matters in its engagement with foreign countries, and we work closely with the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries and, of course, other national stakeholders to project our interest in oil, natural gas, and energy services. Of note here would be the visit by the Honorable Prime Minister to Venezuela during this year, or rather last year, the 5th of December of last year. Energy security and trade initiatives were the focus of that visit, and an agreement between the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela for the implementation of natural gas supply project from Venezuela to our country was signed. The meeting also yielded several other benefits, including the expanded trade opportunities for manufactured goods from Trinidad and Tobago. Madam President, looking forward, implementation of this agreement would remain a priority. We also would like, in addition to advancing the negotiations to facilitate the exploitation of the cross-border gas fields, we would like to continue, or rather we are committed to playing our part in further negotiations with Venezuela to achieve mutual beneficial outcomes. I also would like to mention the visit by the Honorable Prime Minister to Chile earlier this year, in May of this year. I should mention as well that Trinidad and Tobago is the major supplier of liquid natural gas to Chile, amounting to over 90% of the imports into Chile. And we also export to that country a major supply of methanol and ammonia to Chile. We, of course, during that visit, held discussions towards the consolidation of our place in the market and to ensure that other areas, inclusive of a partial scope agreement that would have been mentioned earlier, can be achieved. I should also indicate the extent of the population, number of consumers amounting to more than 17 million in Chile that could provide avenues for our products and our manufacturers here in Trinidad and Tobago. This visit yielded several other outcomes, of course. We would have signed a joint agreement in the area of intellectual property with the Chileans, and other mutual areas, beneficial areas were treated, such as the candidatures in international organizations, specifically the candidacy or candidature rather of Chile within the fold of the Inter-American ICA, Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. Madam President, we also facilitated a visit by Her Excellency Socorro Flores. She is the Undersecretary for Latin America and the Caribbean of Mexico. And as per usual, we would have held discussions relating to energy, trade, investment, agriculture, education, and other issues of mutual benefit to both countries. We recognize at the level of the ministry that trade can be an important driver of economic growth, poverty reduction, and development. Thus, our country has focused our energies within our network of missions abroad, 19 missions, in pursuing such possibilities. Within our official policy framework at the level of the government, the realization of building new and sustainable partnerships is there with countries, of course, around the world. And we have embarked on outreach programs which will present new opportunities for certain sectors within our economy. We, Madam President, continue to focus on improving bilateral relations, and in that regard, we would have held discussions on certain partial scope agreements with a number of countries, as the Minister of Trade would have alluded to earlier, by way of mentioning Panama and Colombia. In 2016, Trinidad and Tobago, the trade with Chile, just by way of an illustration, amounted to about $2.7 billion, and therein lies the potential for making use of such a vast marketplace. Madam President, bilateral diplomacy is essential to advance our work here in Trinidad and Tobago, and we effect this through representatives and delegations from foreign countries at various meetings, whether abroad in the margins of international conferences or indeed here on visits to Trinidad and Tobago. With our foreign policy during the year under review, the ministry received foreign delegations from a host of countries, inclusive of Singapore, Qatar, China, Japan, and Vietnam, and as per usual, mutual interests in certain areas attracted our attention. I would now like to go to some initiatives that we have with the United States of America. Just briefly, we would have signed a memorandum of understanding for the establishment of a state-of-the-art border control system, commonly known as PICES, that would be central to the identification of a traveler's identity against databases internationally and locally, and that would contribute to the identification of individuals who might pose a threat to our national security. Further afield, we would have also posted, stationed an air military attaché at our embassy, or the embassy of Mexico here in Port of Spain, and the intention is to strengthen ties of military cooperation so that best practices and information sharing between the law enforcement agencies of both countries can take place and redound to our benefit here locally. Madam President, I am pleased to report to this eminent House that in the first quarter of this year, the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, via our permanent mission in New York, obtained approval from the UAE, that is the United Arab Emirates, for the establishment of our embassy here, in that country rather, and we are currently addressing the administrative arrangements necessary for the establishment of that mission. Furthermore, we also would have gone some way ahead in the establishment of the High Commission in Barbados. We not only would have had the authorization from that country, but we would have also sent a two-team mission to undertake in an exploratory fashion the requirements, or to seek all the possibilities, the administrative arrangements necessary for the establishment of the mission there. Madam President, I will just quickly move on to other areas of importance to the Ministry of National Security and indeed our country within the fold of CARICOM. And in this regard, the CSME, the Single Market and Economy, and Regional Security come to mind. The Honorable Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, within the quasi-cabinet secretariat of the CARICOM regional grouping, he would have signed, would have been the first signatory to the agreement that treats with, to incorporate the Council for National Security and Law Enforcement, otherwise known as Council, as an organ of the community. I should perhaps mention that in an outreach fashion, the ministry will have been involved in making presentations to University of the West Indies and the Lockjack Institute of Business on matters relating to CSME and other similar undertakings in an attempt to increase general awareness of issues within the remit of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Madam President, I now turn to relationships with other countries by way of the grouping of CARICOM, and we will have interfaced as a region with Japan, with Canada. Indeed, we are currently doing so with Mexico on a host of issues of regional concern that would bring specific benefits to our country. I would like as well to mention that in the case of Korea, We attended a meeting earlier this year, February 2016 in Jamaica, and we facilitated the participation of 8 government officials at high-level meetings in South Korea and China, all within the framework of treating with areas of technical assistance and global issues of mutual concern, whether they be in the realm of climate change, development cooperation, or indeed the CARICOM single ICT space. Relative to the staffing of our missions, Madam President, we would have, during the reporting period, posted 2 heads of missions, specifically the ambassador to Costa Rica and the High Commissioner to the UK, London. They have settled in quite well and are making the contribution contemplated when they were sent. Ongoing efforts continue administratively at this point to allow other persons to assume such charges in the very near future in other missions that remain where the vacancy remains. Madam President, we also would like to make mention of the development goals under the National Development Strategy 2016-2030 of our country, where the ministry continues to advance the government's objectives in the multilateral arena by supporting the work of various international organizations, whether they be the FAO, the WIPO, that is the World Intellectual Property Organization, WHO, or indeed the Commonwealth. Recently, I would have had the privilege to participate as head of delegation to the United Nations General Assembly, which was recently held last month in New York, and we would have extended our domestic policy positions as mirrored in the international arena to that body during the general debate. We would have highlighted sustainable development, including actions that would be aimed at mitigating climate change, the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, as well as the importance of and sustainable use of ocean, seas, and marine resources. As an adjunct, I would like to add that habitually each year when we participate at the United Nations, we allow persons from within the fold of the ministry to participate by way of a training exercise and exposure via in-house training exercises at the United Nations, running perhaps a month or 2 months at a time. And we will have continued in that vein during this year's General Assembly sessions. Madam Chair, I'm coming to a close now, but I'd just hurriedly like to continue by highlighting areas of commonality between states that we have on a regular fashion, joint meetings from the regional perspective CARICOM with those countries, as I mentioned earlier, whether they be United Kingdom or Canada, and, or as recently was the case indeed with Romania, who is seeking support for candidate within the United Nations system. And these meetings presented opportunities to highlight areas of commonality that exist within our states, to identify new areas for engaging in other initiatives, and of course to provide updates on the progress of ongoing arrangements and projects within the fold of such agreements. Madam President, we also have the responsibility and privilege to place nationals of our country within the fold of international organizations as employees, and in that regard, we were successful in placing one national at the Commission on Limits of Continental Shelf for the period 2017 to 2021. This would have come at the expiration of the term of yet another national of Trinidad and Tobago on that body. This continued membership of the Commission is critical, Madam President, given that Trinidad and Tobago has made a submission to the Commission to extend the continental shelf of our country by 200 nautical miles. And if successful, this will bring significant long-term economic benefits to our country. The submission is expected to be considered in the upcoming months by the Commission, and to this end, the Ministry will continue lobbying in tandem with the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, of course via our overseas mission. Just backtracking a bit and making reference to the visit of the Honorable Prime Minister to Chile in the area of sport and culture, we acknowledge their critical contribution potential, that is, to enhancing and amplifying our regional and global reach, and the need to treat with youth problems associated with youth in our countries, and a very successful program within Chile, Football Mass, a program that was designed by NGOs, non-governmental organizations within Chile. We hope to pattern a similar program here in Trinidad and Tobago for poor and vulnerable populations, and we hope to be in a position to sign a draft memorandum of understanding in this area. We also would like to mention, with other countries, Cuba in particular, a cultural agreement that we have in our bilateral relationship with Cuba. And in this regard, the successful visit by the Success Laventil Secondary School Steel Band is relevant here. And this would have taken place earlier this year in March 2017. Madam President, as I indicated in my address to this Honorable House last year, the Ministry is also working towards greater value for money, securing rather greater value for money in the provision of services. And in this regard, the savings that I mentioned earlier, I now have the figure before me in terms of the cost and the savings. It costs amount to about 700,000 TT dollars, and the 1.5 million is the expected return in savings per year. I wish to reiterate at this point, Madam President, that the Ministry is doing all it can to keep expenditure at a minimum, and this allows us to do more with much less, as the figures, the allocation from for this year would attest to. I should also mention that some progress has been made over the last year in strengthening the Ministry institutionally by conducting a review of the International Relations Office establishment and the recruitment of a monitoring and evaluation coordinator within the Policy and Planning Division. We also treat with elaborating a diaspora policy, and I think I'm about to come to a close, Madam Chair, but with your permission, allow me to make mention of the housing of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have identified a property, and we are continuing towards the finalization of preliminary documentation that would allow us to have a building constructed towards that end. Madam President, the range of activities undertaken during the period under review, that is for the past year, and those that are planned, are linked directly to the fulfillment of government's development thrust and seek to protect the interests of Trinidad and Tobago in the spheres of trade and investment, enhancing public outreach initiatives, the provision of services, and broadening and deepening of relations with key partners regionally and internationally. By way of conclusion, Madam President, I wish to state that the Ministry of Foreign and Caribbean Affairs continues to strategically direct its work in executing the foreign policy of Trinidad and Tobago. We will continue to do this by championing, advancing, and furthering the government's objectives through its diplomatic interactions with other sovereign states in the global arena within the ambit of international law, as we continue to put people first in realizing Vision 2030. Allow me, Madam President, to express my sincere appreciation for this opportunity. Thanks.
Honourable the senators, at this stage we will suspend and we will return at 1:30.